Join me, and together we will unravel the mysteries of the world during Dr. X's Half Hour of Power. On a gathering storm comes a tall, handsome man in a dusty black coat with a red right hand. That's
Indeed.
Nick Cave, and I'm Dr. X for Dr. X's Half Hour of Power. We start with the words of a proud Australian, and our stories also come from our special guest all the way down under. A friend of the station for years, one of the first of the 99 of WHPA, my friend and yours, Michael Francis. Michael Francis, welcome to Dr. X's Half Hour of Power.
Thank you, and thank you for paying homage to St. Nicholas Edward Cave, patron saint of Warwick Nabil, Warwick Nabil's chosen son and dark prophet of the state of Victoria. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging that today I am coming to you live from the nation of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and learn and conduct paranormal research, and have been doing that for about 7 years. I would like to acknowledge that the Ngunnawal and Ngambri nations have 60,000 years of unbroken sovereignty over this land here, and that sovereignty was never ceded, and I will pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that to any First Nations people of any nations anywhere in the world joining us on this broadcast here today, Dr. X.
Michael Francis, well put, and you're a good man, and I respect that, and I respect you. Now, you come to us from tomorrow, literally.
Yeah, literally, yes.
There's our first dip into the supernatural pool. Now, Mr. Time Traveler from down under, regale us with your tales of supernatural Australia.
Yes, it is the dark and distant future of the 15th of October, 2025, as I come to you with strange tales of the paranormal history of, in this case, the east coast of Australia, relatively young in terms of European Caucasian settlement. As I said in my opening, we've had First Nations people living and learning and worshipping and maintaining stories and culture on these lands for countless thousands of years. But, the European settlement here is barely 250 years old. But that hasn't stopped us from collecting our own share of spooks and haints and stories, maybe one or two of which I'm going to share with you today based on my own paranormal research conducted in and around the Canberra region, which for North American listeners is essentially Australia's answer to Washington, D.C. So in the same way that Washington, D.C. is a weird, not a city, not a state, seat of government for the government of the United States, Canberra is the Australian equivalent. It's a city that was built specifically about 115 years ago, so at the start of the 20th century, to be the seat of the Australian government. Now, what that meant is that a lot of that washed over a history of colonial brutality. As you know, many people that came to Australia were convicts, somewhat similar to the pioneering settlers that left England and Europe in the junk ships and spent the 7 months at sea to journey to a land they had never known. So what that means is that there's a lot of potent, let's say, spiritual, psychic energy because of the misery and the genocide that was inflicted on the First Nations people, and then the suffering of the indentured servants, slaves, the wrongly imprisoned, the wrongly accused that came here from Europe during the 19th century. So one of the most significant examples of that, based on my own paranormal research, is a building that today serves as one of Australia's cultural institutions. It's the National Film and Sound Archive, which would be the equivalent of the Library of Congress in the US, where they
Understood.
store film, TV recordings that are seen to be of cultural significance to Australia. But it's a building uh, with a dark history.
Ah, and that's what we're here for, aren't we? Michael
Indeed.
Francis, reveal the darkness.
So, the building that today is the National Film and Sound Archive was built about 100 years ago to be a Australian Museum of Anatomy. Now, what that meant in practice is that there's a lot of restless dead in and around that site, be they the First Nations people who were displaced to build their structure in the first place, be they the spirits of those bodies who were put on display in that classic, ghoulish Victorian museum type display where it's, here is the history of the British Empire. This is how great and powerful we are. Here are all the peoples that we have conquered from, sunrise to sunset across the world. And this is how we show you that the British Empire is the dominant global power. It also served as a overflow morgue for the Canberra Hospital, and was a place where many people who had met an unfortunate end, victims of crime and such, were stored in an era before mechanical refrigeration, where there were bodies that were interred in morgues, subterranean, down below ground, where it is naturally cooler. So there are 3 or 4 documented by others, and including myself, known spirits of the restless dead that will apparate under the right circumstances within the halls of the building that is now the National Film and Sound Archive.
So you yourself, if I heard you correctly, have personally experienced a touch from the other side.
Yes, in 2 particular places, 2 of the 4 known main paranormal phenomena. So the first one is in the aforementioned morgue. So as part of the tour that they take you through, they take you down into the room that was a morgue and is now a standard corporate conference room. But the architecture of the building was never changed. So they get you to stand at the back end of the room while the tour guide stands at the front of the room, and it takes you a moment to realize that you are on lower ground than they are. Because, again, in a pre-industrial era, morgues were built on an incline so that all the blood and the viscera and remains could drain down into a sub-drain in the bottom corner of the room to be washed out into what was then the Molonglo River, is now Lake Burley Griffin. So as a visitor to this place, I was standing in the location that previously would have been on a bad day in an Australian summer, 110 degrees in the shade, ankle deep in blood and human remains. And it is a stark, and I felt the power of that place upon me. I felt the sadness and the misery of people who had, left their mortal form in that room, or were perhaps not too keen to leave because they had not died under natural circumstances. So their body was stored in that room. Perhaps autopsies, perhaps postmortems, perhaps reconstructions were conducted whilst their their essence, their spirit, their quintessence, their soul, whatever you want to call it, was still present in that room. And that is a real, spider crawling up the back of your neck, full body twitch once you realize what took place for generally uh, appropriate reasons. There's no suggestion that there was any medical malpractice or uh, any other ritual murders that took place
Sure.
there. It's just a place where dozens, if not hundreds, of people, if not breathe their last breath, it's where their mortal remains lay in state in that transitional, immediate hours and days after death, where some are happy to pass on to whatever comes next, and some perhaps are not for one reason or another. And you can feel the, I was going to say taint, and that implies a negative connotation, but there is definitely a residual energy
Yes.
in that place from being present in a space, again, standing in a spot where if you had been standing there perhaps 50 or 60 years ago, you would have at least been standing in a puddle of blood.
An abattoir, yes.
Yes, a chunk of
yes.
Suffering.
So you walk into this during the tour, and you are hit. Had you been sensitive before, or was this a new experience for you, taking in all this residual energy?
This is, I would say, probably the third time in my life. Once as a very young child, when I had a visitation experience, again in another medical setting, where I interacted with, this was a hospital specifically for war veterans, mostly veterans of the Pacific Theatre of War, where tens of thousands of Australian men died and suffered during the Pacific Campaign in World War II, including most of my male grandparents and people of that generation. So as a very young child, I had an encounter with a spiritual force in that place when my maternal grandfather was there receiving treatment for the injuries, both physical and spiritual, that he sustained whilst being held as a prisoner of war in Borneo after the Battle of Singapore and the fall of Singapore to the advancing Japanese army, which still to this day is the single greatest defeat in the history of the British Empire. And then the second time was skip forward about 20 years to a man of maybe 24, 25 years of age, where I visited another infamous penal site in Australia's history, which is the ruins in Tasmania of the Port Arthur Carceral Institute, which, for those who don't know, if you see a map of Australia, Tasmania is that little triangular island down the bottom, kind of like what Rhode Island is to the mainland USA. If you
Wonderful analogy. Yes.
You were the worst of the worst. You had been transferred from England to the Australian mainland colonies. You had reoffended, typically violently, and you had been sentenced to be serve out your term for the remainder of your natural life in the Port Arthur colony. So there were genuinely some of the worst human beings imaginable incarcerated here. And when you go through that site, they take you to the chapel in that very Protestant idea of, if you accept the power of Christ into your life, you'll be redeemed and you'll be healed. But because many of the prisoners there were dangerous, violent people, they had to be restrained when they were attending service in the church. And there is a particular room they take you in, which essentially is a solitary confinement space. So it's a stone room. For all you D&D folks out there, it's your classic standard 10 by 10 stone dungeon room. It's very Gygaxian, but they say, hey, who's stupid enough or brave enough to go into that room by themselves? We will close the door behind you. You knock when you want us to let you out. You will tell us how long you think you have been in there, and then we will tell you how long you have actually been in there. So, of course, I'm not going to let this chance pass me by, Dr. X, because, I may never be able to reach out and touch the veil so
certainly
profoundly. So I stepped in, and immediately it is a level of almost supernatural darkness. There is no light at all. There is no sound, and instantly is this infinite vacuum of blackness around you. And there are, whether it's a trick of my own anxiety or a trick of my senses or something more supernatural, there are definitely minds in there that are not my mind. That I can feel the presence of other entities in there beyond just myself. And I'm the only person from our tour group who was enough of a divine fool to cross the threshold into this place of suffering.
So you're in there, you exit.
Yes.
A time slip, if you will. How long were you in there for?
Yes, it's very much, I don't know whether it's a time slip in the folie à deux sense or whether it's simply, as Einstein said, if you spend half an hour standing on a needle and you spend half an hour in the presence of a beautiful young woman, you will have two entirely different experiences of how long that half an hour took you. I said I had been in there, I thought, somewhere between 3 to 5 minutes. Everybody laughed at me because in reality, I had been in there for barely 100 seconds.
Stepping on that proverbial pin, as Mr. Einstein said.
I had crossed that threshold between what is known and what is unknown. I had crossed the doors of perception to drop a dime on Aldous Huxley. And in that moment, I was in the infinite blackness of whatever it is that contains this universe that we experience.
Whatever that is.
Yes.
Whew. Mr. Francis, you've taken us on quite a tour. What a rich history, accompanied by tragedy, which still ripples out to this day. And you handled really that very well. Pardon me?
We are talking about events that happened in many cases 100, 150 years ago. So again, a lot of people, especially Caucasian people in Australia, who think that 100 years is a long time, in the same way that people in the United Kingdom and England think that 100 miles is a long way to drive. And you and I, as highway warriors, both know if someone tells you you've got to make a convention or a gig or see family and it's a 100-mile drive, you're like, yeah, whatever.
Right.
Give me 2 hours and I'll be there. But maybe an hour if I'm feeling like testing my luck. 100 years to an Anglo-Australian is an eternity. And my subsequent studies into things like the recovery of a hand of glory in the slums of Melbourne, the persistence of apocryphal Gnostic Lutheranism in the colonies of South Australia and their belief in the lost gospel of Moses, which allegedly is the apocryphal book of Moses, which contains the white magic practices that Moses learnt whilst serving in the court of the Pharaoh, are subsequent mysteries that I have continued to explore in the years since. I see your face light up, Dr. X.
Excuse the Australian reference, but like a boomerang, you better come back.
I saw that, and I feel that there is, and this might be bearing the lead a little bit, but the Amish Germans and the Pennsylvania Dutch of the New England area are very much spiritual sisters to the German Lutherans that fled the Prussian Empire and the Holy Roman Empire and came to the Australian colonies in the mid-19th century. So many of the traditions of things like powwow and secret friends and hexencraft that continue to ripple through New England, especially in those areas around Pennsylvania and touched by that Dutch and German ancestry, are also present here in Australia through a Antipodean lens. So yes, just as we are connected now across the veil of time from Wednesday morning to Tuesday night, our histories as someone from the North England area and someone who grew up in the southern, well, what was the southern Australian colonies. We have potentially a shared mystic, spiritual, hermetic history through those traditions, which trace their roots back to Prussia in the 19th century.
So, to you viewers at home, Michael Francis, clear evidence that you can be smart and cool at the same time, contrary to popular belief, as what the other television shows would show you. Mr. Francis, you are a treasure trove of both interesting history and spooky supernatural. A perfect peanut butter and clam sandwich in my kitchen. Will you join us again, please, Mr. Francis? I beg of you. This was superb.
I will. And if I may, I will give one quick plug to where you can purchase the essays that I have written and the essays of my fellow paranormal investigators, which is this fine periodical, Unknowing Magazine. So this particular issue contains my essay exploring the National Film and Sound Archive. And you can see there, my background is going to mask that. Sorry, you don't want to see the mess my kids have left my kitchen in. But if you Google or use your search engine of choice, Unknowing Magazine Australia, you will find to date 11 issues published roughly quarterly, with a 12th issue forthcoming. And that 12th issue will include my essay on the aforementioned Gnostic witchcraft, which links the New England colonies and the Australian colonies, and that should be out in mid-November. So if you're keen to know more about the supernatural and cryptid history of Australia, I can highly recommend that particular periodical, if only because you will read some of my essays in there.
So in the show, please, we'll talk post-show, and I'll put those in the show notes. And I'll also share this. You're going to have a very hungry audience in the Get Haunted Industries Discord, where we have a channel devoted to the esoteric and outre, and I'm sure they'll gobble that up like cattle in a piranha pond. So that is Michael Francis. As I say with sincerity to all of our guests, especially to you as an old friend, I believe you, and we thank you. This has been a wonderful way to introduce many of us to an unknown history. Most Yankees up here, we don't know much about Australia, but you've certainly, my appetite is not satiated yet, so you must come back and share more. I'm very excited right now, and it's not the 3 cups of coffee before this, but really, you put some beautiful worms on the hook. So definitely, we'll check out your work. And Michael Francis, from the depths of my heart, thank you, thank you, thank you. And like that, another half hour of power has occurred. Thank you very much for your time, Michael. Thank you to the viewers at home. And, of course, thank you always to the station manager at WHPA TV 13, Fairhaven. Good night.
Until next time.
Until next time.